Hey everyone, and welcome back to Shifting Gears. Today we'll be discussing tuning in versus multiplayer. This is the full 1 hour-ish long video, and if you'd rather, I have it broken down into 3 segments that you can find linked below. Also down below are my personal opinions, all typed up in a nice PDF. The guest links are down there too, so be sure to check them out, but now, let's hop into the discussion. Hey guys, and welcome back to Shifting Gears. Today we're going to be discussing weapon balance, and before we get into the stuff, we'll go around the room real quick and introduce the panel. So, Chris, we'll start with you.
Hi everyone, my name is Chris. I go by Modded Talent on YouTube. I've been playing Gears since Gears 1. I love the competitive tunings, and I'm primarily an execution player, but I'm open to any competitive game type, really, so that's a little bit on me.
All right, Brandon, or other Brandon, I guess.
Howdy everyone, my name is Brennan, but also goes the online surname is Berbers. I've been in the Gears community, I guess, a year and a half after Gears 3 release, so I'm not part of the hardcore community. I play both core and competitive, but have a preference to core, play team deathmatch on a frequent basis, and yeah.
Alright, and I guess last but not least, we got Waldo over here.
Yay, I'm special. Hey guys, I'm Waldo. I'm a dedicated observer, caster, analyst for Gears Esports. I also work with the pro players on the competitive weapon tuning stuff. So, yeah.
Hooray. And I'm Chaps. So I've been playing for a while. I prefer competitive tuning, but I feel it's a bit weak. We'll get into that later. Primarily enjoy dodgeball when I play, even though that's core tuning. Alright, but let's hop into today's discussion. As always, I just want to start off by giving a little bit of background, so that you guys have information about what this is going to be about. So this one's pretty simple. We've got core tuning, which pretty closely aligns with previous games. It's actually a little bit weaker than previous games, but at a high level of play, or if there's a large amount of team fire, stuff seems to feel overpowered. Enter now the competitive tuning. But one of the issues people have there is that if you're not playing well as a team, or you're not playing at that high level, you can feel pretty weak. So I guess it's the majority of players, not necessarily the vocal players, but a majority of the players like that more powerful feeling, and hence we have a split tuning. So that's kind of my brief overview of tuning. So let's go ahead and open it up to the panel. Waldo, I guess we'll start with you about what tuning you prefer and why.
So, I make this argument all the time with pro players. My argument is never for what I want. I like competitive tuning. I think it does a lot for the game, and especially from a skill-wise, like you can start seeing the depth and mechanics and stuff from other players. I still think that there's stuff that we can do with it. We've made a vast amount of improvements to how the game actually plays. Especially around how the shotgun works now, and gave it like a quality of life Lancer buff and stuff like that, so that the guns are functional the same way. I think the secondary weapons need to get looked at, but I think we're in a better spot weapon tuning wise than we have been in previous titles, where it was not balanced for anything else than just playing the multiplayer, because it wasn't looking. Again, these guys are playing for millions of dollars, so when you're having issues like that, competitive integrity is a huge issue. So we can't have the game where one gun is a god gun and it does everything, and it kind of deflates the meta. Right now, it's kind of like the boom shot, but the boom shot's not broken. Teams just don't know how to play the game type.
Even though that's like a power weapon, you still think
I just think that it has a big draw to it, so I won't go into like the power weapon stuff, but I think a lot of the secondary weapons have too much output for how we've slowed down the game, and they do too much with too little. So sometimes I am on the end of I would rather I require players to be more accurate and hit their shots, to be more efficient. We sent in like some hypotheticals for weapon tuning for like the marks and stuff, and it does the exact same amount of damage. Again, if people aren't aware of how much damage your gun, like how much health they have, they revealed this earlier, late last year, that each character in each game type has 600 hit points. Yep. So when you have 600 hit points, you have a lot of leeway of how you can move the damage around in the weapon and still have the exact same amount of shots. The front load is just not as heavy as it is when you're popping someone. Like a Marks that does an insane amount of damage still in competitive, and really if you tune some of that back out of the forward damage, you can make the gun more balanced. It still takes the same amount of shots, it just does a little bit less if you're missing. So
Yeah. So I guess you prefer the competitive tuning. Would you necessarily push for that on like a universal tuning setup? Would you prefer to keep a split?
I actually have a better idea for this, and I don't want to split. I really think that what they need to do is they just need to change the health bar since it is 600. If you use the competitive weapon tuning and you figure out a sweet spot of where you want the numbers to be and how many shots you want to do in core, what the core is now, the thing is that you can just live longer in competitive. So instead of having 600, let's say you give them 450 or 400 or whatever. So that we have one tuning, you just understand when you go into competitive, the guys are going to live a little bit longer. It doesn't change anything with the weapon damage. It'll be more consistent, and you'll get the same result with less frustration that we have.
Yeah, so I guess Brennan, as someone who comes from a core background, and I guess you've played a bunch of competitive as well, or competitive tuning. What are your thoughts on keeping a consistent tuning between them but changing the health values?
Well, in contrast to Waldo, who definitely has a lot of experience with competitive and having that kind of scenario with being the esports moderator and all that essence, and me being a newer member of the Gears community, it's basically an essence of I'm more of a laid-back gamer in the essence of basically preferring a tuning where shots are more consistent and shots are a little bit more powerful so that it's not as consistent on basically skill than competitive normally is. So in that essence, when it comes to core, it's just I personally prefer it because of one, the damage of the shotgun, two, which is definitely very, very controversial because people don't really like getting hit with bricks from medium range for 90%. It's definitely annoying for me. And then there's also the matter of fact where there are a bunch of weapons that kill really easily, which is definitely a benefit for newer players that are in the community and can...
Yeah. So, I guess, Waldo, I wouldn't really be completely opposed to your thing. I think it would be better than what we have now, honestly.
When I thought about it, I was like, we have 600 hit points, and if we can figure out... Because essentially you're doing the same thing, right? Your core tuning would still be... Your shots would do more damage because you would have a less of a health bar. So you would get the same impact, but you wouldn't be overall affecting the other side of the game. And so both worlds exist where the newer players have a more accessible game on a lower level, but it's not as... And then the merger into competitive is just like, oh, I just need to hit more shots.
So I have one counter to that, but Chris, I want to hear your opinion on
Yeah,
this.
so a lot of good information from both of you. I'm somewhere in between. I haven't gone to any competitive tournaments, but I play competitively. Obviously not a fan of core. I didn't even know that there was necessarily a distinction between how much health the player has and all the different types of weapon tunings that the differences between core and competitive. So just broadly speaking, I'm a fan of the competitive tunings because you live longer, and I think it raises the skill ceiling. I like your idea about the just kind of messing with the player health, so to speak, but to me that still doesn't eliminate the issue that I have, which is just to have one universal tuning all the time. I know there's this kind of approach where we want to make the game more accessible for newer players, and perhaps the Coalition thinks the way to do that was to give us tunings that have a higher damage output. But to me, I think the issue is always just, it goes back to matchmaking, who you're putting players up against each other. I'm a fan of the competitive tunings to keep that higher ceiling in terms of skill, but I just think there needs to be a better job of putting players of similar skill level up against each other so they don't feel like they're getting team fired and competitive and that they're absolutely useless, or that you're a good player in core and you're getting shut down because the weapons do a lot of damage. So bottom line for me is still one universal weapon tuning that has a higher skill ceiling, and that's why I favor competitive. But I think Waldo's idea is really good. I didn't know much about that before, and I see where you're coming from too, Brandon, with the core tunings kind of empowering you. But yeah, I stand with competitive.
So,
And
oh, go ahead.
sorry to intrude, and one thing I definitely do want to add to that, I accidentally skewed off at the end there, but it's because I want to add one more point, is that I guess I prefer a core tuning to the extent, I don't hate competitive, it's just to the extent of a play style. Because of the power of the shotgun, I normally like to lay behind a piece of cover instead of utilizing movement, which in past Gears games, since there was one tuning, you have to utilize both cover and you also have to utilize movement whenever you don't have any cover. So whenever you have a very high damage ratio with the Nasher shotgun and that essence, you normally have to avoid shots by staying behind cover and utilizing cover, like lefty switching, extending your shot outwards, and then going after opponents whenever their health is down. But that's another reason. It's just definitely because of the playstyle and that I pursue, and that same playstyle doesn't really utilize with that well in competitive, and it's the only one I grew up with whenever I was playing Gears of War.
So you'd say the Nasher is probably the biggest thing for you in the biggest difference you see is the Nasher between core and competitive. So,
yes, sir.
Okay, for me, the Nasher is a big difference for me when I play, but the biggest thing for me I see is the rifles. Just like when I play core, I can pull out my Hammer Burst or Lancer, like either of them, and just down people crazy fast. And then in competitive, like if I'm playing against an unorganized team, I can still do really well with the Lancer or Hammer Burst, or not Hammer Burst, with the Lancer. But like if I'm playing against a decent team, I'm not gonna be a god running around with my Lancer. But Waldo, one of the things I wanted to bring up on your solution is, so we have weapons that have like the Hammer Burst or the Marxa. They're not a constant stream of damage. And if you keep the same like tuning, or damage values for the guns, but you lower the health, you might change the Hammer Burst from like a 4-shot down to a 3-shot down, or the Marxa will change from a 4-shot to a 3-shot at different points. So I feel like if you balance it for one health thing, then that transition between how many shots it takes on the Marxa versus how many shots it takes on the Hammer Burst is going to change at different health values depending on what you have that at.
Well, it would say essentially what you're doing is, again, if you're understanding the element of how your health bar works and how much more you're adding into it, especially because in competitive, the damage values for the marks are still ridiculous. A lot of the secondaries, the Boltok and everything, they do too much with too little. So they do need, in my opinion, need to be tuned back anyways. But when you're looking at it and you're lowering the health bar, again, it's that accessibility thing where, yes, you're going to have to hit maybe 1 or 2 more shots to get the downs, but in the same way, it's still a better solution than what we have. Is we have 2 different values, and remember, I've gone through and I've shot every gun, so
yeah,
and I have the numbers, so it doesn't make sense the way that it is, where we have one value because it looked good on paper, and then we have another value which is competitive, but then even then that's still too high. I'm all for, again, a more tuned weapon set so that everything is more in line with everything. And once you do that, and if you have a really good balance set where there are trade-offs and everything, theoretically you're talking about removing some of the health bar is not going to affect the game so much. It's going to actually make your shotgun play a little bit a lot stronger. It's going to make your Lancer be more effective. It's going to make your Hammer Burst and all your other things. So you're still going to get the same reward, which is, in my mind, what we're kind of looking for. We want the game to be that accessible. But as you get into the higher level, when you do ranked and competitive, you want it to be so there's a little bit of a shift, but it's not night and day in comparison. I shouldn't have to change my pacing about like how far I have to play. Like I should have an idea, like if I shoot someone at this distance in competitive, I may need to be, I may need to hit one or two more shots versus my gun is really good here and it feels like it's not any good over here.
I feel like you'd run into that issue though, like if you, so I don't know the damage values like as well as you do, so I'm just gonna make up some numbers here. But say in competitive, you have your let's say Marksa. How many down or shots to down is it with a Marksa right now in the body?
I'll tell you right now.
Okay,
I got it.
I'm curious about Marksa and Hammerburst.
I can tell you. Where's my docs? Because this is what this thing exists for. Weapon damage.
Which, by the way, if that's a Excel, like a Google Doc you have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've seen that before. If you want to send that to me, I can have that linked below for anyone else to check out. Because I have scrolled through your weapon damage thing before, and it's quite extensive.
Yeah, that's a lot. It's best for everybody in here, but so essentially, like, it's 2 damage less as what it is. So if the health bar change, it's not too much. That's Lancer. That's post patch. Hammer burst depends on your range of the hammer burst. It does like 11 a shot, but that's 11. That's 11 per bullet. Yeah, so that's like 33. So you're saying, like, let's say you're in close range, it kicks out a ton. I think you even rebalanced it, or they did something to it. I can't remember. It works outside 15 feet, and then everything like balances out. So it's like 15 damage. Like once you get past like the 16 point mark, we'll just do 15. That does 45 essentially every shot that you're doing to the head. So if you're shooting them, that's what, say 6 or 8 shots. So it's not anything too crazy. But and then the Marksa is insane. This is the competitive. Yeah, I did a rebalance for this. So the way that I look at the Marksa, it's the same. All the secondary weapons, by the way, are the same in both game modes. So they're no different in those. So you're looking at the same tuning for those already.
Okay.
So like your headshot damage is 48 a shot, which is insane. Well, it's 48%, so that's a percentage.
Yeah.
So 48%, you're looking like you're hitting almost. It's a 2-shot headshot. If you pop an active on somebody, they're dying.
Yeah.
So it really there's
what
a
is
lot
it on body without active there?
24%. So it's like a 3-shot.
Yeah.
3 or 4 shot.
So
yeah,
let's say like 5 or 6 shots for hammer burst and 3 or 4 shots for Marksa. If you drop the damage, or if you drop the health down, you might end up with where now you need 2 shots for the Marksa and I don't know, 4 shots for the hammer burst. So like the DPS will stay the same and the health is dropping by the same amount, but just because it's not a consistent stream of damage, you're going to throw off how effective those are. They'll have the same DPS, but one of them might require 1 extra shot or 1 less shot compared between the tunings, and I feel like that could completely throw off the balance between those weapons.
Yeah, I'm gonna figure it out real quick. I'll tell you what it does. Yeah, you can go ahead and talk while I try.
I was just gonna say that the solution to the issue that Brandon Chaps is bringing up is just to make a universal weapon tuning, because then you're not gonna have to deal with these problems.
That's my vote, is for universal tuning. But I mean, obviously competitive players don't want to play with low health or extremely powerful weapons, and a lot of the core people don't want to play with the weaker stuff.
So like I was saying, I think it comes more down to trying to understand why it is that certain players don't want to play with certain weapon tunings. And I think for competitive players, they'd rather the guns do less damage so they can kind of show off their skill by moving around, staying alive. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon Larson, but core players want to be able to kill faster because, maybe it's a little bit easier when instead of getting ganged up on people and not putting out a lot of damage. So if you can kind of understand the reasons for why people want the values, then you can maybe figure out a solution that works for everybody. And once again, that's why I'm just pushing for better matchmaking. If you put players that aren't, at a super high level against each other, it doesn't matter if they're both playing, in my opinion, with guns that are that do less damage. They're gonna have.
I don't think we're gonna find a solution for everybody. I think there's a medium that you can find, but one of the things I've discussed with some other people before is just you're not going to find that solution that pleases everybody. A split tuning doesn't necessarily please everybody either, but you need to find some balance and use that and essentially tell people this is the way it is. We can adjust it as necessary, but we're having one tuning, so you guys are all using this same thing. We'll fix it as needed, but here's the tuning. Let's stop this debate between which one is better.
Yeah.
Well, this is a Halo Reach topic, too, because Halo Reach did the exact same thing where they had, and this is one of our arguments when the game was coming out of why not to have two, but they realized, like, the competitive aspect of the game, especially when people were playing for money, the core tuning it's too much, and again, it's an argument regardless of how it goes. I always am going to argue for competitive integrity because you want the game to be as balanced as possible so that it comes down to who outplays who, not what gun is 1,000 times better. And
you can have balance in either one. It's just about time.
Right.
It's about time to kill, really, right?
Right. Well, and it's just if you try to play, like, I know they did escalation on core and I didn't try it, so I have no idea, but I would have absolutely probably lost my mind just because I do stuff I played on core and it's okay. I understand my shotgun works and I can pull off a lot of stuff that I can't do in competitive because I have to get a little bit closer, but at the same time, that really a lot of the dynamic fights that we see in certain situations would definitely not be there because you kind of want people to be, because that element of an outplay can happen more in competitive than it can in core because you're going to be able to slip in, like your shot does 99% of their health and they have 1% left and they can just live in, and if they can pick up a couple kills while almost dead, that's a mechanical outplay and that's on the other team for misplaying. So there's a little bit more punishment there. To the other thing of like how the weapon tuning works. So essentially right now, the way that the marks is set up, not my rebalance one, but the first one. So it's technically, without actives, it's a 5-shot down, and with a active, it's a 4-shot down. And so if you change the numbers, it's maybe you're looking maybe a 3-shot down, both ways. So it's not, like I said, my solution's probably not the end all be all, but it's better than. It's the whole
having a completely separate,
like an entire world of everything else, and that's the problem. Now in competitive, again, Marks just doesn't do headshots anymore because of the fact that you can 2-shot active somebody and kill 2 people because the damage ratio is too high. I played a core game and some dude was ripping me with the Marks, and I was like, well, this is not fun. Why is this? This is not okay. Like, oh, he just like. Boom, boom, dead. Boom, boom, dead. I was like, okay, well, this gun is broken in here just because of the way it's set up.
So, speaking of the like completely separate things between the tunings, one of the things I wanted to bring up real quick is the wall bouncing mechanics and how they're trying to update those on the competitive tuning side. But before we get into the competitive side, Brandon, I wanted to hear what your thoughts were on like the state of wall bouncing right now compared to previous games, or if you agree that the hyper bounce should be in the game, or if you think that having some sort of wall bounce delay is the right thing to do.
It's definitely a thought-provoking game mechanic. In Ultimate Edition, there was obviously you couldn't cancel off of walls, and then they had 2, 3, even Judgment. And then you also have 4, which you can definitely cancel off of walls, bounce from place to place. And that definitely leads to how the player wants to play the game. I've seen some montages by some of the like social clans that aren't really as competitive as Optic and Envious and Echo Fox and them. Like Chaos. Yeah. A bunch of those. GSQ. They have a bunch of people that do the hyper bounce, that do strafing, that do left triggers, pop shots, a bunch of different utilizations of their methods of killing other players and performing to the best of their abilities. And basically in the essence of wall bouncing, I like how the coalition are definitely changing it in competitive to continue experimenting with it. Because leading into another subject, Gears of War 4 is sort of in a very late part of its life cycle, and I think it would be a good idea for the coalition, now that it's like very old in terms of video games, to definitely experiment with the formula over and over and over again, and find what gameplay mechanics, and eventually find what wall bouncing mechanics would definitely benefit in Gears of War 5.
Yeah.
And that definitely would be my stance of what I like what the coalition are doing, but I can definitely understand the blurry line of why people would be controversial about it either.
Yeah. So, Chris, what's your perspective on wall bouncing?
So I don't want to pretend like I know how many different changes the coalition made. They made a lot, so I didn't keep up. I think Brandon made an excellent point about the idea of experimenting now that it's late game. But I also wanted to hear Waldo's take on this because I know you're a competitive analyst. So my take, for me, they did like way too many changes with the wall bouncing. I think they changed the distance. You could slide at one point, or like there was a wall bounce delay, and then they took it out. I've been pretty fine with wall bouncing in Gears 4 since the beginning. I think it's pretty smooth. If I had to select, I would just say to give players freedom and not restrict their bouncing, and just let them have whatever playstyle they want. But for me, even though it is late in the Gears life cycle, you could say, way too many changes in terms of the movement that they're having us play with, and I really just want to see them, either pick one thing or get close to something and just stick it out, because it's kind of frustrating to have to relearn and what is going to be the competitive tuning. So that's what I wanted to ask you, Waldo. Maybe from a competitive player standpoint, is it frustrating for pros to have to say, oh, now I got to learn how to wall bounce like this, or this is going to be the new standard?
It's not. I'm probably one of the people don't know. I am a very big advocate against the wall bouncing system. Not the way that it is. Just there's certain mechanics. We found out. Essentially, the best way to say it is the wall bouncing system the movement system in every Gears game has never been looked at as the core problem of why Gears has issues. Just never was. And then we started bringing it up. The amount of distance that you could close initially, and you could still close, is 7 tiles on checkout, which is really ridiculous. That is one move that the player going at full speed can hit this corner and be playing defensive, which is a big thing that didn't exist in Season 1. We didn't have a lot of defensive play, so what ends up happening in those situations is that the defensive player is punished for not moving instead of being given an advantage because they're setting the person up. So what we suggested, and this is me and a couple other pro players, is if you shorten that distance, you create a smaller window. You create a window where the player has a window of trade-off where you can be punished inside that thing. Now, mind you, there was a bunch of different wall bouncing things where they had the air bounce console cooldown off. Again, I argue for what's best for the game on a competitive level all around. As a spectator, as an observer, you cannot watch Gears of War on no air bounce console cooldown. It is literally impossible. It hurts people's heads.
I like watching it in like a montage real quick. It's like, oh wow, that's amazing that someone could do that. Spectating a tournament or even me playing, I hate it.
It's bad, and honestly, it's been a complaint throughout the entire spectator process that when this is off, even the entire first season, people get nauseous and dizzy because it's too fast. And what we're trying to do, and the overall goal, in my opinion, of what we should do, is kind of go back to a slower Gears 2 style where you have to be more. You can still move crazy, but you have to have some limitations on that so that the game speed slow down. You get an acceleration bonus for wrapping around cover that came from Gears 3. I shouldn't go faster just because I took a piece of cover and whipped around, right? At the same time, the other side of this is that we have really high crazy sensitivities, and that allows Gears is a completely different game if you're looking in the scope of how Gears works. Your camera, your aim sensitivity and your look sensitivity actually controls how fast you can move, because you can wrap around and see another piece of cover, and all you have to do is be in range to do that. If you slow down how fast, or create a limitation on how fast the character inside the game can do that, it slows it down. We actually had a test where we had players play at 20 sensitivities, and it was probably the best looking Gears that we've had. But because the game's been out for so long, we can't do a dramatic change like that in this game, which is okay. Like, we're not trying to solve all the problems, but we're starting to realize and starting to show the coalition and issues that overall the game is going to, you have to start looking at all the aspects of it. It's not just that the shotgun does too much damage, it's that you can move too freely with the shotgun, and if you put some limitations on that, then a player has to think a little bit more and set up instead of trying to do these crazy, because it's, even though some people say you're thinking the entire time of how you're setting up your wall bounces, you're really just manipulating the cover system for your advantage. And if that goes away, then you have to slow down what you're doing and think a couple steps ahead, play it like a chess game, and try to anticipate where the other guy's going. That's what I miss about Gears games. We don't really have that. There's certain situations where you can kind of outstrafe somebody, but the strafe speed's way slower than what you can do in a wall bounce situation, so there's not a good trade-off. When we had 2.1, you could see players that actually utilize strafing a little bit better, because you could stop and then move a little bit faster because the other player had to get closer to the wall before you could engage in combat.
Yeah, so one of the things they did to slow stuff down is have that slip distance cooldown on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess one of the things that I've been thinking about is they're testing all this competitive wall bouncing tuning stuff, and from what I understand, that was to help tune competitive. Are they going to put those changes into core? And
I hope they do. I honestly think it would be better for the game, because then again, you guys should have whatever playstyle you want to play with. And I know some people are going to be like, oh, you're just on the competitive side. I just want a game that's functional, that there isn't so much frustration, that if I get beat because I was outskilled, not because the game mechanics are giving you an advantage. I think that's a frustration point.
I feel like it's just another gap, though. If it's not put into core, not only do we have a different weapon tuning, but there's different movement mechanics. I mean, it's not like the biggest movement mechanic, but I mean, wall bouncing is an important part of the game, and if you have different tuning and different movement mechanics, that's pretty big.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, so Waldo said something earlier about pacing, which I thought was really good and important and applicable here. It's just that, when you go from competitive to core, or vice versa, I mean, you don't want to feel like you have to switch your pacing and you're playing in an entirely different game. So yeah, I'm of the view that if you're going to also alter how the movement works in core versus competitive, it's just another thing for your average player to have to wrap their head around, when maybe they really don't want to have to do that. You want to be able to play whatever game type it is you enjoy with some consistent settings. So I mean, whatever they do, for better or for worse, in one set of game modes or settings, I hope they do for the other, just for consistency's sake.
Yeah.
In terms of the universal tuning and then having two different types of tuning, whenever I heard Waldo display and talk about his side of the competitive way he described things, it was definitely eye-opening for me, because I did not realize in the 5 years I've been playing Gears that there are that much aspects that go into the game, and that definitely is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, people I don't pay that much attention to the competitive stuff. I pay a little bit of attention because I'm involved in the community and stuff, but I've primarily played core, and whenever I talk to Waldo, or anyone in the competitive community, it's amazing seeing how much detail goes into this stuff.
It shocked us when we figured it out, and the more you learn about things, the more you question the, I guess, foundational mechanics of the game, you start realizing that if we fix, and this is one of the principal arguments that I used when I was talking to the pros, I said, if we fix the foundation of the game and which is the movement system, then what we do with the secondary weapons and all the other weapons means that we could shave some damage off, because that was one of the arguments. I talked to Node in Vegas for a little bit, and I said, it's like, the weapons are too strong, and he said, well, it's because the movement system, and it's the movement system in the shotgun. I said, so the issue here is not the shotgun. It's the, like, what is the real point A that we need to fix everything else? And I was like, if we just start taking a look at the movement system as an issue, and then kind of focus on what we can do to make it better, then we can do other things with the weapon tuning so that the shotgun and the movement system are not the principal argument of why we're not tuning back the rest of the guns.
Yeah. So I guess speaking of Ryan, you have all these weapon values that you've collected. Have you guys had any discussions about Coalition releasing these values and making the official ones publicly known? Because the fans have feedback, and like, I bet you could give 1,000,000 times better input on stuff if you had the actual values.
I would love to see it. I don't know from their end of what they're going to release and what not they're going to release. It took a long time just to find out we had 600 hit points.
You should have asked me. I've known that since Gears 1.
See, I didn't know what it was. I was like, no one knew what the remedial value was to actually find out the damage. And so when we figured that out, we were able to go back and actually look at weapon damage and make better arguments, because once I knew that information, it was like I had everything but what I had 100%. So you're talking like, oh, we have 100 health. That's how you assume it. When you have 600 health, all of a sudden your window goes from this to like this.
Yeah.
And you're like, I have so much more freedom and play, like, we can play with the weapon tuning and send it back and say, like, we could do this for it. And I've done charts with Kenny because they did a Lancer quality of life buff where in competitive, the closer you got to somebody, the less damage you did. And then they got rid of it, and everyone was like, no, we don't want a stronger Lancer. And I took the numbers of the pros and I said, it's not that big of a deal. Really, all they did is they buffed the Lancer 1 point of damage. And I was like, if we were dealing with 100 points, like, yes, this is a big number. But it did the exact same amount of damage. You downed it the exact same amount of time. It didn't really affect the overall gameplay, and it made the Lancer more consistent, which was a good thing. That I shouldn't be punished for having my Lancer out and someone's flying at me with a shotgun, and my gun doesn't output enough damage in that situation that I'm making the right play, but the game's punishing me. So I don't know how they're gonna like release all the weapon damage. I wish that they would, so that it can be a discussion point. Other people can come up with ideas and opinions. I did it for me just so that I could be, can we fix? I want the game to be the best, regardless of how I feel about competitive and everything else. I want the game to be the best environment because I've played this for 10 years. It's been a life investment for me. A third of my life has been spent on Gears of War. So when I talk about it and I'm passionate about it, I want the game to have a future life cycle past 5 and 6. I want it to be a game that other people can get into and they don't just put away for another shooter, right? They get in and they stay and they invest in the community, and then we have more depth, more competitive players, more content, things like that. So having a better foundation on the game is where I'm going with it as an overall, community figure. But again, I don't know what information is going to be released. I wish that they would release everything publicly. Just be like, here it is.
Even if it's just a simple info dump and it's not very organized, and it's like, hey, you guys want it? Here's the info. If you want to organize, go ahead and organize it yourself. Like, I would definitely take time. Like, I've even asked for raw data for Horde stuff. It's like, give me that data, I will go make charts and crap and make them available. And, like, versus, I would love to see that stuff. But
I think it'd be great, but again, we'll see what happens and how they decide to release everything. But I think it would be great for the game overall, just so that people can understand the only things that are different between the real core tunings is literally your Lancer, your shotgun, and I think it's your pistol. Those are the only things that are different. Everything else is the same. So, unless I'm wrong about the pistol, never mind. The pistol's the same too. So, really, the only thing is the Lancer and the shotgun are the only two differences in the main competitive tunings, and the movement system changes. So, we're really only dealing with two things. They could do a universal tuning. It just depends on, is it accessible enough for newer players that want to just get on and have fun and not have to sweat their life away.
Yeah. So, I guess another key difference between core and competitive is loadout. So,
all
right, so I don't think it's really up for discussion. The hammer burst is overpowered in core, right?
Agreed.
I mean, that That's not something
No
we
question.
can really debate here. It's overpowered. The coalitions even acknowledge this.
Mm-hmm.
I personally enjoy having an option of a loadout. I would like to see it balanced. I understand their issues on it. If they drop the hammer burst damage by a little bit, maybe it's going to change the number. It's going to add an increase in trigger pulls. Like I might have to do an additional trigger pull, and then the gun's too weak or something like that. Especially with burst guns, it's very difficult to balance. But I would like to see a tuning set that allows for loadouts. I just think it adds variety to the game, and I don't know, makes for different play styles. So I know I'm probably in the minority on this with liking loadouts. From all the people I've talked to, everyone wants the universal loadout. But so what are your guys' views on it?
I mean, I guess I'll kick us off.
Go for it.
I actually might be with you, chaps. I don't want to sound hypocritical here because I'm all about the universal weapon tuning. I'm not opposed to people coming out with hammer bursts or enforcers or whatever it is, as long as they don't add the sawed off. That was a nightmare. But I just think it's one of those things where if it is going to be competitive, then I don't know. It just makes sense to me that everyone starts with the same weapon, the Lancer, Nasher, classic loadout. But for the sake of online playlists and whatnot, I'm completely fine if people want to select whatever weapons they want, as long as each gun kind of has its own niche area and one doesn't overpower the other. So that's about all I have to say on that, really.
It's definitely a very blurry line on how to actually balance the secondary weapons and then the weapons that you actually load out with, such as the hammer burst. So besides the hammer burst, the first point I want to make is that the coalition, from the Retro Lancer to Gears 3, which is the Devil Spawn equivalent to the Sawed-Off, I think the Coalition did a good job of making a downgraded version that wasn't too overpowered in the form of an Enforcer.
I think the Enforcer's pretty balanced. Some people hate it,
Yeah,
but I think it's pretty balanced.
I definitely think so too. And it definitely has a lot of trade-offs. It's powerful in close range. It can combat a Nasher if you're skillful enough to use it. And for a core setting, is definitely pretty balanced. Now, in the terms of a hammer burst, I won't deny that the hammer burst is like a sinner's weapon or anything like that. It's definitely really powerful, and it's a really good crossing tool. I guess the only problem I have with it, whenever a whole team spawns with the hammer burst and is able to basically burst people down in like half a millisecond, and hair's torn out, my astros are probably halfway across the room in pieces. And I guess it's just a problem with basically a bunch of people having it, and where the line gets really blurry is that, in my opinion, I am going to have to contrast with chaps in the essence. Like, I feel like there should be a hammer burst as a pickup weapon on the field instead, due to the sheer power of the hammer burst. Or if it is going to be a startup weapon, maybe tune it down a little bit. Maybe give it a little bit of a boost whenever you have a pre-active with it, or basically anything with that in mind.
Yeah, so Waldo, I know you don't play core very much.
I love the Enforcer, actually. So I will tell you that I think that gun is underused in competitive by a lot, just because I have no window where I can't be shooting that thing. I think it's like less than a half second where you do the reload. You can not even hit the active and still be taking people out. I actually, when the game came out, I was just using the Enforcer all the time, and I was picking up tons of kills with it, and I was really proficient with it. I think that there are certain aspects of the competitive where if we did the right things, you could have competitive loadouts in certain things. I think the Lancer Nasher makes it a little bit easier, and I understand why it's there. I've always thought about having people that are proficient as secondary weapon players. If you look like Explosives from Optic Gaming, he's the best player with a Retro Lancer that I've ever seen in any Gears title that it's existed. So from Gears 3 on, he is so good with that weapon. And my argument is the gun is broken, but it does so much damage. It has no fall off and no trade-offs to it, but he can down people across the map just playing support fire with it. And I think I saw one game where he had like 18 downs in 5 rounds because the weapon was down. So you're talking about there are players that are going to have a higher skill ceiling than others with it. So I can see that happening. And starting out with a hammer burst, they did that in Gears 2, but the Hammer Burst was not the same weapon that we're looking at right now. It was like a single fire, and when you can just beam people, and it's based on how fast your trigger speed is, it has no firing cap. It's not okay. It ended up being really bad for the tournament. It ended up getting switched back, but at the same time, I understand it. I think that players playing a little bit farther back, having a hammer burst to kind of pepper somebody as they're going in, especially with the damage trade-off, like the closer you get, the less it does. I think it can work. It just depends on how everything in the game types and everything in those dynamics work, because you're playing with the balance. It's like, oh, we all have lancers. Oh, two people have hammer bursts. What if one guy, like, if they split smokes and stuns, what if the guy in the back has a smoke or has a stun and then he has a hammer burst and you're standing out in the open and you're just, you're dead to rights just because of it. We're talking about different loadouts for the next game. I don't know how you do that. I don't mind it. I like competitive depth. I like having some variety in there so it's not as vanilla, but I don't know how you would effectively balance it to control what players are using. So that's the difficult side of it. Yeah,
because like the core perspective, they're actually talking about removing it and making it a secondary and core even, which I would be against. I'd want them to try to balance it and keep it as a loadout. But even on the competitive side, like you were saying, I'd like to see that depth and add more variety. You have maybe your home hill player on some maps who are going to be sitting back a little further. Maybe they'll want to opt in for a hammer burst. Although if they get rushed, it sort of sucks not having that lancer there. But
that's all right. Headshots. That's all you got to do.
Yeah,
shoot him in the face.
I feel like Gears 3 put a bad taste in people's mouth with the hammer burst and the loadout options.
I do want to confess that in Gears 3, I knew about the shooting through walls glitch back in the beta, and I never said anything because I was like, no one gets to know about this. This is my trick. And then eventually everybody figured it out. I was like, I think it took 3 patches to patch that out, actually, for the first-person perspective. But it was, when I figured it out in the beta, my friend Andre was like, dude, you're shooting through the wall. I was like, really? I was like, I see him. He's like, yeah, you're shooting through the wall. I was like, don't tell anybody. We kept our mouths shut about it.
Like, yeah, I mean, just having, I don't know, Gears 3 put a bad taste in people's mouth. I think Coalition was way too quick to throw the loadout option out the window for competitive. I think, I don't know how much time they spent trying to balance it in competitive, but I feel like it would have been a nice thing to have.
I don't know. I wasn't at those playtests, so I don't know exactly what the conversation points are. I can speculate what they are, but I have no idea. Really, it's just because it's so much easier. Everyone's just, what you have a Lancer, and if it's tuned properly, and you have a shotgun and it's tuned properly, you don't really need to have too much else. And especially with the game type where you get to put weapons down on the map, and it's not like there's stuff to pick up. It works. It just, I don't know. It's weird. It's one of those weird situations where it's a gray area that I don't know how other people would respond to it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I'm speculating here too, but even with the current Gears 4 competitive system we have, I mean, to me, the Nasher is probably more entertaining to watch than, or Nasher on Nasher versus a Nasher on Enforcer. Just probably more entertaining to watch those shotgun battles. And then maybe starting off with a hammer burst might kind of promote people to stay on a home hill or just kind of ding people from far away. Whereas a Lancer, you can still provide that support, but you kind of have to be a bit closer and it's just more consistent. So I think they're just two weapons that are just, really strong and provide good, entertaining gameplay. So that's why I like it. But I guess I am with Waldo in that it just isn't explored that much. I was also going to say, though, in terms of like how it is just in the regular playlist, I think like different loadouts are really fun and we should encourage them, but I kind of wish the Coalition would address faster if there is discrepancy in weapon values, because yeah, we've talked about the hammer burst and how it's overpowered, but how long has it been allowed to just stay like that? And that kind of hurts the game. It needs to be addressed quickly, weapon imbalances, if you're going to allow for different loadouts.
Yep. Let's see. So there's another topic I wanted to bring up, which, Waldo, I haven't spoken to you about this one in quite a while, but I know last time we spoke you were pretty
I hate it.
Pretty strong
I know where
feelings.
we're going.
And so active boost.
I hate it, but I hate it for the reason of, again, competitive integrity. You shouldn't be giving people damage steroids for reloading their gun. And the foundational argument still is the same. Epic put it in the game just because people weren't using the function, decided to give them a power boost for the social playlist. It shouldn't be in competitive. It shouldn't. My gun shouldn't do more damage. That also again relates to the argument of we can buff you can buff the shotgun damage if you don't have to tune for 2 tunings. Like, it has a better ceiling without it.
That's one of the strong arguments I've seen is if you need to tune stuff, it is much easier to tune weapons for here's the damage values they do, not here's the damage values and here's what they can do.
Here's the damage value and here's your cap versus here's your damage value, and then when you get an active, your cap goes up to here. You're like, what? Just give that the cap and then just balance the gun, and then we call it a day. I think if you want to have something for actives, have active utility. Make the gun do something different, right? The Boltox shoots faster. The Enforcer has double stopping power. What do you want? The Lancer
Torque charges faster. Sniper gets like the penetration.
Gets a 1.5 or something. Not like super broken, but gets a little bit a rate of fire buff or something, right? For a little bit of a window. You can do all these different things. Maybe the Sniper gets to do like. With an active on it can penetrate, right? Like,
actually, real quick, one thing I've proposed for the Sniper for quite a while, which I've heard mixed feedback about, is an active with a Sniper shoots someone in the legs, and they do like a quick tumble type thing, or people hate getting stunned, but something to mess up their movement slightly, so you're taking that risk. You're not going for the headshot. You're intentionally shooting them in the lower part of their body, and it slows them down. It's kind of like an extra strong stopping power.
If you hit them with an active, actually, they get 90%. Their movement gets slowed to like 90% for like a half second, which is enough. I think that's good. I think that if you're going to do stuff like that, where the active hits you, it should be a check system. I think that the Sniper is utilized in a poor way, especially in competitive. People are playing for headshots instead of playing as a support weapon where you play for secondary damage. If you shoot them, that means my job, when I played competitively at LANs in Arizona, I get that weapon, and my job is not to get kills. If I get kills, it's great because it creates an opening on the map. But if I shoot somebody, they are now, in effect, they are 4-pointed and makes my team have a bigger window to push, and it's knowing how to play around those windows. I don't know if tumbling and all that other stuff, because it goes too much back to the active down days where people were just playing for actives, and it's not fun to play against. That's why they removed it in UE, because you can't move around the map. You just die instantly, and people are too good at a high level where it's just like, you're down, my team's going to come pick you up, oh, you're down, and then you can't move and you can't make any kind of decisive pushes and stuff. But like, back on the point, it's if we can just balance out the guns, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with the guns having some kind of crazy utility that works because it's gears, because it's been in the game for so long. I'm not saying to get rid of the active component, but I'm saying the damage steroid, there should be no world where my gun, just because I reloaded it, gets extra damage from a balance standpoint. It's a flawed argument, and just because it's been there every game, I will take it back to the movement system. The movement system wasn't changed until we decided to do something about it. I think the actives are in the same ballpark. We're coming up, I am boldly predicting, I've said it like on Twitter, on streams, I think Halo 6 is getting announced this year and Gears is getting announced next year. Like, we've got a while left in it. This is a 2-year cycle. Like, they're on 3-year cycles now. We've got time. If you want to make those changes, it's not a bad idea to make it so that the next game is tiers above where Gears 4 is, and just that we've understood the beast that was Gears from Epic to the Gears that we want it to be in the future, where it's a balanced game and there's not all these little nuanced things that you have to know that I've got an active, I'm going to go try and get this little bit of extra damage to win this fight.
Yeah. So, I guess, Brandon, let's hear your perspective on this, because I've talked to Chris about this a little bit before. I've talked to Waldo a lot, but I'm curious to see what your perspective is on the active boost.
Well, actually, Waldo 100% nailed what I was actually thinking about the boost when it comes to active reloads. The power that you normally get from an active reload by simply clicking the right bumper on your controller, it's a little bit overkill in my opinion. And whenever you play with the competitive tuning, it can definitely feel a little bit one-sided and feel a little bit overpowered for absolutely no reason whatsoever. And I definitely like the fact of there being an active reload, which is perfect, successful, fail. And if you do a perfect reload, there are different ways that the weapon handles. Like for a sniper, I was thinking maybe the bullet is very slightly bigger, so it's slightly better to get headshots. And
I think they do that now, right?
I don't know if I don't remember. I haven't played with it enough to like know if the active around the hitbox is more responsive with it or without it. I haven't tested it, so I don't know.
Anyways, yeah, that's basically it. Once again, Waldo 100% nailed what I was thinking about the boost and the active reload. So
I'd be curious to hear from like anyone watching this video. Respond in the comments or hit me up on Twitter or wherever. I'm curious to hear from someone who's really adamant about keeping that damage boost in there, because I mean,
if they exist, come and talk to me. We'll have a very long conversation. I'll buy you dinner. We'll sit down. I'll bring a whiteboard.
Well,
I haven't.
I mean, in that case, I can play devil's advocate. I mean,
Let's go, Chris.
My actual position is I'm somewhere in between. I used to really hate them. I think like really your reward for hitting an active reload should just be having a faster reload than people. That in and of itself is a reward, you know. So there's your miss, you just did okay, and then you hit it perfect, and your gun is ready to go much faster. So you know you don't even necessarily have to have all these cool little things that the guns do, like fire faster. I don't absolutely hate active reloads now that they have it that you can pop it whenever you want, and then it has a cooldown. I remember when people used to pre-fire, that kind of bothered me. I thought that was silly. But now that people can kind of pop it whenever they want and it's on a cooldown, I feel like you could argue it adds this extra element that players have to kind of account for and decide when they're going to use it. It's something that everybody can use, so it's not. I don't think it necessarily favors one person over the other. It's just up to the player to decide when they want to use the active reload, when they think it's a favorable situation. I think that's the best argument you can give for keeping them.
So I guess sort of talking about the mechanics, there's two aspects of the mechanics I wanted to bring up. And the first one is so let's say we're getting some sort of bonus, whether it be damage or mechanic based. Where should that active mark be placed? Do you think that it should be like some weapons have the active spot all the way to the right side of the thing instead of the left? So you can hit it right at the beginning and get that quick reload if you want, or you can wait a little bit longer and then get that mechanic boost. Do you think?
I think it's a weird spot just in general. They've never made it super challenging. In every Gears game, the Lancer, the shotgun, and the pistol have all been in the same spot. So you didn't change anything with how it works. It's because it's fundamental, and then some of the other weapons you can play with, and you just have to learn how to use it. But it's kind of like you're punishing players. Like they could get the reload, but if they wait another half second, they get the trade-off. I don't know. It's just a weird thing. Like if you're gonna do it, just make everything the same. I don't think it needs to be anything. It's a mini game. Just make the mini game the same for everybody and not try to make different elements where I have to anticipate. I have to remember that I have to wait another half second for wherever the other one is so that it will work. Like the window is the window for a reload. Just if you decide that it needs to be moved down further so that I can't clear a clip active and then clear another clip, like that's where I see the issue.
Well, real quickly, from a design standpoint, I think the specific different kinds of weapons have active reloading bars in terms of perfect, all that. They have them in different locations because it's sort of a design aspect and a standpoint where the character's doing the animation, they're reloading their gun, but right before the magazine goes into the slot, that's when you click it and then it becomes faster. I think that's for two reasons. And the first reason is because I think it was a little bit easier for the coalition to animate and make the speed a little bit quicker. And I think the second standpoint is to make it a little bit easier for people to reload, because it relies a little bit on muscle and visual memory, and be able to have a visual indicator of when to actually press a button. Because say you're in a Nasher fight, you're trying to reload your weapon as quickly as possible and not die because you accidentally misclicked the right bumper and jam your reload, and next thing you know, you get back aid and you're basically dead. I think it is a designed implementation of basically having the player know when to actually reload correctly so that they can actually do it on the fly and on the go. So
yeah, I think it definitely needs to be consistent between the guns. Not necessarily the same time. I don't think the timing needs to be exactly the same, because some weapons you're going to reload slower than others. But I think the location of where that perfect active thing is should be consistent. There's a couple weapons in Gears 3, and I think there's a couple in Gears 4 as well, where the perfect thing is on the right side of the active reload area. Mm-hmm. The other mechanic thing I wanted to bring up is I forget what they're calling it, but the new active reload system they introduced in Gears 4. Where you don't need to fire your shots, you just get to press it and reload whenever you want, and it gets the full clip. I guess, Chris, you said you really like that aspect. Brennan, Waldo, what do you guys think of this system?
Thank you to Gears 3 Competitive. That is why, or Gears 3 Competitive Play is the exact reason that exists. People were wasting shots, so they said, oh, well, we'll just allow you to do it any time. Then you realize during the beta that people were activating boom shots off the rip, and you're like, oh, that's not okay. An active boom shot, you can have 2 active boom shots, which makes that gun even stronger. Like, there's some trade-offs and stuff with it. I don't think it's a bad thing. They tried to do some kind of MOBA mechanics with it, where having a cooldown would fix the problem. I just, like, it's cool if you want to do a cooldown kind of thing, but the principle for it was to get extra damage. Again, fundamental problem. Just get rid of the active damage, and I'll be a happy camper. I'll never say anything about it again. I've really been good about not ranting about it, because it always bothers me, but I just kind of let it go. I just like, I've already said it. So
what about the fact that they have different systems between, like, Horde, Campaign, and Versus?
How the system works? Yeah, that's a barrier to entry kind of thing. It really is. You just have to look at it as a.
Do you think they should make it consistent?
I would just make it consistent. I don't know why you would. That's a lot of extra work. You know what I'm saying? Like, why would you do? At least from a person who's played the game for 10 years, I would just be like, just make it the same. It's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be anything too crazy. You're just trying to balance out the way that the game works. There's other people that may be on the other side of the spectrum, but my personal opinion is, if everything is universal, there's no reason to have 12 different things trying to solve one problem. Just make it one, use it, and then make it so that the people coming from the campaign, if they go to the multiplayer, it's not that different. There's no weird barrier to entry of them trying to figure it out.
Yeah. What about... So I guess one of the things Ryan brought up a lot at launch, or when the system was initially announced, is now you no longer need to guess whether or not someone has an active, or how many shots they have. If you see them get a reload, they probably have a full clip of actives.
You just know when you get shot. You as soon as they shoot you, you have an idea if they have an active or not. Yeah. But in my mind, I don't care if that happens. Like, if they have an active and I don't have an active, that's not changing the situation. If I have to fight for an objective, I have to fight. So I'm fighting without an active because I have to. It doesn't matter. Like,
it's too late at that point.
Yeah, it's like, I'm already here. The identifier is okay, I guess. I can say from how I play Escalation, off the rip, if we're talking about Foundation, I'm the guy usually like third or fifth spawn. So my job is to either play in host pocket or play up on secondary and cap the home. So I pop my active as soon as I wrap around the first bend around where that fountain is, and then I just lay in shots as the person's running down because I can do it. Because why not? I'm going to try to get his active damage. My whole goal, though, is not to down the person. It's just to lay suppressive fire and get them red enough where they can't contest the push. and then my players have the opportunity to go for control. I did it to actually my friend, one of the observers, Cleaner. We were playing, and we played a match. I think we were playing 3v3, but every time I knew what he was going to do, and so I just counterplayed. I knew where he was going to go, and as soon as I posted, I just laid down the fire and then waited for my active to come back up, and then traded back so that his position, he was locked in where he was. Like, you can't leave. You're red enough where you have to either stay in cover or you have to go, and you're not going, so you're going to stay where you're at. And as soon as you pop up to try to challenge me, you're going to be in the same situation.
Yeah. Let's see. Anyone else have anything to add about the active reload mechanics?
When it comes to the active reload and having the system, once again, I'll know the name of it. It's, the system that basically whenever you reload out of spawn, you can have pre-actives. In my opinion, it's definitely a good design, but I initially thought the problem sort of eliminated itself because people normally fired shots in Gears of War 3 to get the damage boost, but then say if the Coalition actually implemented the feature of actually removing the power buff and utilizing basically just having the weapon have different values rather than having a higher damage, that basically eliminate the problem. Why would you waste ammo to basically have a weapon that maybe would handle just a little bit better? Because if you use up all your ammo, you basically lose your weapon for close range engagements, and you'll either have to resort to a Lancer or Hammerburst. And if it's close range, you're basically screwed. And basically, in that essence, I definitely like what they were going with the system. And if they were to keep the damage buff, I also like that you can only get it once and then it has sort of a cooldown so people won't have to abuse it. And yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, definitely picking it up and having that cooldown so you can't active your boom right away was that was a big win.
Active booms, active drop shots. That was crazy times.
Yep. All right. Let's see. Just taking a look at my notes real quick. We covered the split tuning. We didn't really talk about how it splits the community, but I think that was somewhat implied.
If you watch it at all, you know that there are two totally polar opposite people. And honestly, I don't go on the forums anymore because of those issues. I don't deal with it. Like, it's just not worth the time and the arguments and people trying to argue. They're not going to change their opinion, and they're not willing to have a different perspective. So you're just arguing with the wall at that point. I'm open to whatever if it's balanced, in the sense that you've said this before, chaps. It's like it is balanced, but it's not balanced the way that I would like it to be. But again, when I'm arguing for balance overall, so that everything works in a fundamental way. That if it's a 50-50 fight and it just comes down to how the players play it, which I think is a better, overall environment for that. But yeah, it's definitely, I don't know, the community's super split on this. I don't know how the solution's solved. We kind of gave some good points about how we can get around it, so that would be cool. Either way, I'm happy if we go to universal tuning, or if we do a health change or something that's out of the blue that we haven't talked about. I'm okay with it.
Just as long as we don't have these two completely separate buckets that we're in right now.
We have two sides, and you pick your side, and you just live on it, and you never, come over, and it's like, oh, okay, we're just gonna be split forever. Okay, thanks, guys.
Yeah. All right. Well, so
it's definitely.
Go ahead.
My apologies.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to add real quickly that the line between having two split communities is very blurry, but very, very sharp. And basically, I heard people definitely want to vie for a universal tuning because they're not. I can't really think of a game besides Gears of War 4 that has two different tunings of weapons. Is there another game that utilizes that feature? Or
only one that had it was Halo Reach, and they never did it again.
I mean, there's some games that, like Call of Duty, will have hardcore mode and stuff like that.
But that's like a mode where you just they get rid of radars and stuff like that. That's not it's not like a completely separate specialized tuning for everything. They're competitive. What people play with naturally is what the guys play with competitively.
Yeah, and definitely with that, it's just I feel like having the two different tunings rather than just one. in my opinion, I think it's a step in the right direction, and I think the coalition, like, in my opinion, it's basically a big level up from what they did with Judgment by completely revamping the controls, where it was basically a third-person Call of Duty with a cover-based system to try and bring in more casual players and grow the community. Instead, they try to appease newer players with a tuning that is definitely catered to a more casual audience. But at the same time, it's just not a lot of people and not a lot of games would definitely allow having different tunings in that aspect.
So do you guys think Gears 5 will have 2 tunings, or do you think it will have 1?
I hope it has 1, and we'll just pray for that.
And with that,
pretty sure it's going to have 1. No worries. I was going to say pretty sure it's going to have 1. And honestly, yeah, like universal tuning is the only way to go. Players in my opinion, players like me aren't playing TDM, Dodgeball, King of the Hill, because it's frustrating to go and learn a different set of guns. And I bet you the same is true of core players who aren't playing Execution and Escalation. And it's too bad because I enjoy those game types, and I'm sure people enjoy Execution, Escalation. But you just almost can't be bothered as a player who goes to hop on to play for an hour or two to force yourself to learn 2 different sets of things. So I personally don't think the coalition went in the right direction with introducing 2, and I'm crossing my fingers that they introduce a universal weapon tuning for the 5th.
Yeah,
definitely, and it definitely props to the coalition for experimenting with this. Now they know that it doesn't work, and now they know what the community wants. And also, I don't really think there needs to be a split tuning for 2 different groups of people, because there's also the elo system. You have people less experienced with the weapons, then they're going to get a lower elo, like bronze or silver, and be able to play with other people. So it's sort of just eliminating the problem. And hopefully the coalition definitely learns. They definitely went in the correct direction of trying to appease both the new and the old communities that still play this game. And I hope they definitely take that into consideration.
Yeah.
Once again, fingers crossed for everyone here that they do put a universal tuning for Gears 5.
Yep. So we covered split tuning, a little bit on the split community that it causes, active reload buffs, and loadouts. Is there any other weapon tuning related stuff that you guys think we should cover?
I think that covers it all for me that I can think of.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, that's pretty good. So that covers all the topics I wanted to hit on. We'll start to wrap up here in a minute. Let's go around the room one more time, same order. So I think, Chris, we started with you.
Sure. So, Chris, Modded Talent, that's where you can find me on YouTube or Twitter, and you should check me out if you like just commentaries about different discussions or you try to improve your gameplay on Gears 4. So, Modded Talent, just type that in on YouTube.
All right, Brandon.
All right, everyone. I'm Brandon. I once again go by the online surname of Berbers. I do have a Twitter. Twitter is where I'm mostly active. I recently started up a YouTube and a Twitch as well, and I'm still getting the equipment for right now, but I will start posting content discussions about Gears of War. I definitely want to discuss with other people about how we can definitely talk about more discussion topics, and I definitely want to become a part of the Gears of War video making community and definitely contribute in my own way as much as possible.
Cool. All right, and Waldo.
So I'm Waldo. You guys can follow me at Waldo RTK7. I do have my own YouTube channel. I'm trying to get back into it, but working full time was always hard. But I do a lot of the commentating, observing, and analysis for the Gears esports scene. So you'll probably see me in Vegas and stuff like that. If you all have any ideas, feel free to talk to me. I'm usually pretty responsive on Twitter to have an open discussion. But yeah.
Cool. Thanks again for joining me, guys. I've got all of their links down in the description so you can go check them out. So to reiterate one last time, for all of these panels we do, we're just a small group. I try to get it somewhat diverse so we can cover different sides of stuff. But we're just a small group telling our story. If you guys have your opinions, be sure to, use the comments, go on Twitter, go on forums, Reddit, wherever, and let people know your thoughts. And in all honesty, I really feel like it would be nice to get the coalition discussing this with the community. There's been a few small notes back and forth, but Like, we don't really understand their side of the stuff too well. I think it would be really beneficial to get a debate like this going and get someone from the coalition in there to say stuff. But I'm not going to get off on a tangent about that. You guys know I could probably talk about that forever. So, anyways, thanks again for joining me. Thanks for everyone watching online, and I'll catch you next time.